Hey everyone, Mr. Denton here again. We're going to look at part 2 of Article 1 today. So, more stuff dealing with Congress. This is going to move really fast. We do have two big important topics to look at with Congress. The last dot down there at the bottom is mostly just looking at who our representatives are, and that's not going to take very much time. So, I'm hoping to get this done pretty quick today. Again, though, don't want to shortchange these two bigger topics we're going to look at because they both are extremely important. Okay, the first one is elections. Okay, we are in an election year right now. This is being recorded in 2020, and it's a presidential election year. This tends to be when more people pay attention and more people participate. But elections actually happen every 2 years. And the ones that take place in those off years, 2018, we had one. We're going to have another non-presidential year in 2022. Those elections, some people would say, most people would say, are just as important, but the participation goes way down. And our participation is not nearly as high as it should be to begin with. So just something to be thinking about. That's going to come up in a couple other places here. So our general election takes place in November every other year, every even numbered year. It always takes place on the first Tuesday after the first Monday. You'll notice this video here. Again, I can't play videos within these Prezi video lectures, so I'm going to link it below. It's super short and does a pretty good job of explaining why we have it on the first Monday after the first Tuesday. It dates way back to when America was more heavily based on farming, and also because transportation was a lot harder to get around from point A to point B back then. So things have changed, and some people have started having thoughts and conversations about what we can do to make it so that more people will get involved and vote. Even talking about turning election day into a national holiday, so more people will go out and participate because not enough people do. So there's a bit of a debate, and some states are moving more in that direction than others. But just keep an eye on that as the years go by, because that is something that you're going to continue to see more on. The entire House of Representatives is up for re-election every 2 years. Okay, remember, the House is supposed to be more responsive to the will of the people, and so that's how it works. By contrast, the Senate is supposed to be more independent, not only of the president, but also of, in some ways, the American people. They're supposed to be able to make unpopular decisions, when they feel like they know what the right thing is to do, even if it's going to make some people mad. And so for that reason, not the entire Senate is not up for re-election every 6 years. They kind of rotate it around and break it up. There's the reasoning behind that. Contrary to what you might think, even though we have these elections to elect federal leaders, even those federal elections are run, regulated, and carried out by the states. So the states' legislatures, those people that we elect to represent us in the Illinois Congress, which we'll talk about later on, they're the ones that make the rules for Illinois. They're the ones that make the regulations. They're the ones that draw the lines as far as how we're broken up. Remember, we saw that map yesterday of Illinois, and they are the ones that draw those district lines. And the states are the ones that are responsible for counting and securing the results. Now, this is incredibly frustrating to some people for some reasons, and we're going to talk about a big one here in a second. It gets really messy. There are states that usually, they seem to have problems over and over and over again. But one of the positives is that our elections being so fragmented and messy also makes them harder to hack. All right, so like in 2016, obviously the big topic was whether or not we had Russian interference in our election. We probably did, but not in the ways that most people realize. And it wasn't that the Russians got in and changed the number totals for the votes and stuff like that. They may have some people think they may have done that in certain places, but there's not one big national database where all the votes are counted and somebody can hack in and jack up all the results. Because the states all run these things individually, and the votes are all counted at the local level, and so it makes it hard to get in and mess with stuff. And by and large, most of our election counting machines and things like that, they're not even hooked up or connected to the internet, a lot of them, for that reason. Okay, So, like I said, some people get frustrated with the way that the states run elections, and one of those reasons why is something called apportionment. And what this basically means is we are stuck at the number 435, okay, in the House of Representatives. How those lines are drawn in each state, and we'll start with this. Every 10 years, when we count our citizens, which again, we're in a census year, they're going to count how many people are in the United States and where those people live. And once they do that and they see how the population is divided up, they may change the number of seats that a state has based off those numbers, and then the state will then be forced to redraw their lines. Okay, and so that's where things get kind of dirty and messy and confusing. And a state legislature will draw those lines, and they can draw them basically however they see fit. Now, why is that an issue? Because the party that's in power of that state legislature is the one that's going to get to control how those lines are drawn. Okay, I would love to show you this video over on the right that kind of explains some of the issues with that, but you can kind of get the idea. I mean, really, the only rules here are that there can't be any gaps in a state. Every inch of the state of Illinois has to be covered by one district or another, so they have to touch, and then they have to be proportional. In other words, somewhere close to 750,000 people living in each one. Okay, remember, it's not about geography, it's about how many people live in that district. Okay, the rest is pretty much the discretion of the states. And again, if you've got political parties in charge of drawing those lines, it's just natural, logical stuff there that they're going to draw those lines to benefit their party. Okay, so again, I'll include that video, suggest that you watch it. And some of the things that we could take from that video, if we were able to watch it, is knowing that there have been maps that have been struck down by the Supreme Court and by state Supreme Courts because they have been so obviously rigged for one side or the other, or that they've been trying to disenfranchise or take away certain people's right to vote, or their ability for their vote to count. And so there's all different ways that gerrymandering is done. Don't have time to get into that, but it's just know that, I mean, the fact that some have been struck down, it's evidence and proof enough that people have bad intentions sometimes when they're drawing these maps. Okay, the thing is even though this is a hot topic in politics, and you have even President Obama and the former Attorney General under President Obama, they've made it one of their causes. I mean, a lot of people wonder, what is Obama going to do after he's president? Because he was a very young president, and therefore much younger than most former presidents. He's going to have to decide what he's going to do with his life now. And one of the things that he's decided to really focus on is this idea of gerrymandering, because a lot of people feel like it's just not democratic. It's not right. And people argue, you'll hear it if you watch the video, that voters are supposed to choose their representatives, not the other way around. But a lot of people feel like the political parties are choosing their voters rather than the voters choosing their leaders. And so that's the opposite of what democracy is supposed to be. It also makes it possible for us to have a majority minority. In other words, you could have a situation like we've had in recent years where you have the House of Representatives that is a majority Republican, even though fewer Americans actually voted Republican. If you counted up every American in their vote over that that election, you would have more people voting Democrat, but you still had more Republicans in the House. Okay, and that happened, I believe, in 2014 and 2016. Now in 2018, the tables kind of turned, and you've actually got Democrats in charge of the House, and more Americans voted Democrat. But it makes that possible, that idea of a majority minority. Okay, here's the last thing on gerrymandering. A lot of people agree that it's an issue that needs to be looked at and, if possible, dealt with. And people have tried all different kinds of things using computers and, independent commissions and things like that. But it's more complicated than it sounds to try and fix this stuff. And in some instances, we actually even gerrymander ourselves. You think about Albany, Illinois, and Richland County. Um, we are one of the reddest places. So, one of the most conservative regions in America, inside one of the bluest states in America. And it does not matter how you would try to gerrymander things, and no matter how you draw the lines, it's going to be that way, period. Because typically speaking, conservative people tend to move into more rural places and move in closer to each other, and more liberal people tend to live in the cities. And so we kind of self-sort. We sort ourselves a little bit, and sometimes we're a product of our environment too. But that's getting into a whole other ball game with psychology and sociology and stuff like that. So we're going to keep the ball rolling here. This only affects the House, doesn't affect the Senate, because the Senate's it's based on an entire state, and the state lines are not going to change, and those just are what they are. Okay, all right. So there's a lot of stuff here that I'm not going to spend very much time on. I spent too much time on the last slide. Compensation and some rules and things like that, how much folks get paid. And you have the House majority and minority leaders. They make a little bit more than the average member. And then the Speaker of the House, like I said, makes more than any other member of our government except for the Vice President and the President of the United States. Congress can give itself a pay raise, but it doesn't take effect until after the following election. That was decided using an amendment, 27th Amendment. And that's done for obvious reasons. They can't just, hey, let's vote and give ourselves a pay raise right now. So they made that change. You have to be in Congress and serve for a minimum of 5 years to get basically retirement, any kind of retirement benefits. Congress makes its own rules in terms of how the game's going to be played and when to punish or remove members and things like that. And if you're going to remove someone, just like if you impeach a president or, like I said, a treaty or any of those kinds of things, 2/3 vote. Like I said before, that's a big number to remember. If anything really important, super important, usually is done by a 2/3 vote, not just a simple majority. All right, Congress. What does it look like? What it looks like is changing. It's becoming, the last, however many Congresses in a row have been the most diverse ever. So, in other words, this is the most diverse Congress ever. The one before this one was the most diverse, and the one before that, and probably the one before that too. And so they are getting more diverse. There's more minorities than ever. There's more women than ever. It's more religiously diverse than ever. But it's still overwhelmingly and disproportionately old, white, Christian men. Okay? White men hold 75% of the seats, even though they only make up 1/3 of the population. Over 90% identify as Christian. That may, we could get into a discussion about what that number actually means, but those numbers don't reflect what America actually looks like. And so there are people who think that that's not a good thing and they would like to see it continue to change. Other people think that that's the way that it should be. Just understand and know that it probably will continue to change. I mean, we're on the cusp of probably we will have our first female president in my lifetime, let alone yours. It's going to happen sooner rather than later, most likely. So just some things to be thinking about there. All right. So there's elections, lawmaking, the other big topic we need to look at. This is a pretty big, complex topic, and I'm going to try, like I said, and keep this as straightforward and as simple as possible. But bills can start in either house, and understand a bill is a law before it becomes a law. They can start in either house except for revenue bills. Remember, those have to start in the House. Okay? For a bill to go to the president to be signed and become a law, it has to pass through both houses. Okay? A quorum or a majority must be present. All right? to vote, and then a simple majority is all that's needed to that's all that's required for a bill to pass. Okay, except for you've got a list here of some things, like I said, that require a 2/3 vote. And so, like I said, anything really big is going to take a 2/3 vote. Impeaching a president, getting rid of a member of Congress, overriding a veto, ending a filibuster, which is a big topic, which we don't have time to talk about, amending the Constitution, calling a constitutional convention, and so forth. All right. I need to hop back real quick. A bill doesn't become a law until the president signs it, and that has to happen for it to become a law. Unless a president says, nope, I'm not going to sign it, I'm going to use my veto power, and then Congress can actually override that veto with, you guessed it, a 2/3 majority. Okay, and then it will become a law without the president. All right, it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. Just to give you a little sense of how many bills die in Congress, and here in a second, I think I've got a graphic that shows you the whole process, which, like I said, we don't have time to talk about here, unfortunately, but it's not going to be surprising to you that this many bills die. 10,000 bills are proposed every year, and only a few hundred make it. And there have been, there's been a lot of discussion about the fact that, well, hey, nothing gets passed in Congress anymore, and so on. And that's true, but it's also kind of false. In fact, we have just as many laws get passed every year now as we ever have. What has changed is the significance of those bills, those laws that have been passed. The divisiveness and the politics that we have right now, it's so divided that they can't agree on anything that really matters that much. And when they do, they just barely get it by. Because it's just that we are so politically divided, and it's become so unpopular to compromise and to work with the other side. And Americans are confusing. They hate that Congress doesn't get anything done, but they continuously send people in there that promise to not ever back down and never work with the other side. And if you think about that, that's ridiculous, and it makes no sense. So I would tell you, I'm not going to get up on my soapbox too much because, like I said, we're trying to hurry here, but I would tell you to value people who are committed to compromise and working some with the other side. That's what America was founded on, was compromise and giving up some of what you want to get some of what you want, and understanding that we're never going to agree on everything, but we got to try to do the best we can to keep moving forward. Well, we have not really been moving forward for a while, and it's largely in part because of the way that Americans vote and the way that some Americans don't participate. So keep that stuff in mind, okay? A couple videos here, again, I will include in there for you. I'm Just a Bill, really, really famous, important, video, I think. I think it's a rite of passage that every kid that takes a government class, a lot of you guys probably saw it in middle school, for the past 50 years has watched this thing, and it just kind of quickly explains a really confusing process in just a couple minutes, and it's kind of funny now and old and corny and cheesy, but it's still pretty interesting, pretty good way to figure out and learn how a bill becomes a law. Another video that says, hey, wait, it's actually a little bit more complicated than that, and it gives you some statistics and things like that. And then finally, a Saturday Night Live clip that just shows you how big of a part of our pop culture the original video was. And it's a couple years old, but still kind of relevant and funny to watch. So I'll include those. Gonna bounce through this here real quick. And we will finish up here by looking at the reality of what it means to have a bill become a law. And you see, if you want to pause here, I'm not going to sit on this too long, how complex it can get. And one thing to know and understand, that the same bill has to wind up passing both houses. Sometimes you might have a bill start on one side and it passes, and then it goes the other side, and then that side makes amendments and changes, and then it might pass there. Well, then the other side has to then re-vote to approve that version of the bill. Or two versions of the bill that are very similar might start on both sides, and both sides pass their versions of the bill, and then they have to send members from both houses to get together in a conference, and they have to agree on one version of the bill, and then that bill has to go back. That version has to then go back and be repassed by both sides, all before being signed off on by the president. Okay, and there's so many other things, committees and things like that that go into making changes and things along those lines. So it's complicated, it's confusing. There's a reason why a lot of Americans don't pay close enough attention to this stuff, because it's hard to follow. But just because something's confusing and just because it's complicated doesn't mean it's not important, and doesn't mean that we shouldn't be paying attention, because regardless of how confusing it is, when they pass these laws, it affects you, and you should be paying attention to how your representatives vote and whether or not they're working with other people, what they're doing. And if they're not doing their job, you need to fire them, okay? Or send them back if they are doing a great job, whatever the case may be, okay? But we all should be paying, we may not sit and be news junkies, but we need to be paying attention, okay, as much as possible. All right, so our representatives in Congress, and these are the folks that actually directly represent us. The fellow over on the left, John Shimkus, has been our representative in the House of Representatives in the Illinois 15th since 2003. And there's a question mark next to his retirement, but I think that's pretty much a done deal at this point. He has said he plans to retire next year, so we're going to have someone new taking his spot. And I believe, that's probably going to be a Republican again. Like I said, we are in a very red area here, but that's something to watch. Obviously, that is the person in the federal government that is the closest to us. So that's a seat you should watch and follow. Tammy Duckworth in the middle there. She is our junior senator. That means she's been there. Of our two senators, less time than the other one. Okay, so you have your junior senator and your senior senator. Tammy Duckworth is a unique person. I mean, she fought in the Iraq War. She is a female. She lost both. She's a double amputee. She lost both legs below the knee. And then just within the last year or two, she became the first. This shows you, like I said, kind of a lack of diversity in Congress, especially in the Senate. She is the first woman to ever have a child while being a senator. Okay, so that's a kind of an interesting thing, and she is one of our representatives, one of our senators, and so she's a rookie senator. She's up for re-election in 2022, but I would say she's a long shot. But I actually saw her name mentioned the other day as a possible running mate for Joe Biden, assuming he becomes the nominee. Okay, so that's just something to watch. Dick Durbin has been he's our senior senator. He's been there since 1997. He's up for re-election this year. He is the number 2 guy in the Senate, and he's very heavily involved in immigration bills and things along those lines. He seems one of the leaders in that category in the Senate. So we got 2 pretty prominent members representing us from Illinois, and before that we had Barack Obama, who was a senator who became president of the United States. So there's been quite a few folks over the last couple of years that have had a pretty significant role on the national stage that are from Illinois. Last slide I believe we'll look at here, and then we'll be done. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. She's a Democrat from California. She was the first female Speaker of the House, and she took that position back in 2006, I believe. She lost it in 2010, and then she regained it again in 2018. So she's I think just turned 80 years old, and don't know how much longer she's going to be there, but she's one of the more prominent figures politically probably in the history of the United States of America. Some people think she's great, some people don't like her very much, but there's no doubt she's a significant figure for sure. And then over on the right, Mitch McConnell, another pretty significant guy. Remember, being the Senate Majority Leader, he's the guy that makes the Senate go. He's been the Senate Majority Leader since 2014. He's up for re-election this year. We shall see whether or not he holds on to his seat and whether or not he holds on to that position. All indicators are that the Senate is going to be up for grabs. And so if the Democrats take over the Senate, then he will no longer be the Senate leader, even if he gets, or the majority leader. He'll be the minority leader if he gets reelected. Okay. All right. So like I said, I tried to go through that one as quick as I could. Remember the videos that were in here, I'm going to have those posted right below if you want to go in and watch those. Some of them are really helpful and or entertaining to watch if you've got time. Make sure you just get that outline filled out and you submit. Make sure you guys are participating, and just let me know if you got any questions or issues as always, and look forward to hearing from you guys. Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Take care of yourselves. See ya.